OK, those of you who watched the show last week will have seen the feature we did about Jimmy Murphy and the campaign by Brian Mulholland to rename K-Stand at Old Trafford the Jimmy Murphy Stand. Well, tonight on the show I'm pleased to have Paul Murphy. He's the grandson of Jimmy Murphy, and Paul is on the phone now. Paul, how are you, my friend?
Hiya, John. Lovely to speak to you again. You enjoying lockdown?
Well, I think we've been lucky with having such good weather, but more importantly, I was chuffed to see you were watching last week because I saw you in the audience and making comments. I'm just wondering, what does it mean to you and the rest of the Murphy family when you hear fans and former players say there's a need for a bigger tribute at Old Trafford for Jimmy Murphy?
Yeah, I mean, words fail us as a family, really. You've got the likes of Brian Mulholland, big characters, Brian, Matt Battle, Steve Donoghue, yourself, John Gubba, Pat Burns, Keith Norris, and all the members, really, of the Manchester Munich Memorial Foundation that kind of push for this recognisation of Jimmy Murphy. And now it just blows us away, the time and push for this, either a statue or naming the K-Stand. It means so much. And every time I see the guys, you thank her, and they're probably getting sick of me thanking her, but it's remarkable for us, and it means so much.
It's wonderful to see what it means to the family. I got involved originally when the Association of Former Players wrote to the football club and asked for a Jimmy Murphy statue to be placed at Old Trafford. It took a year for the reply, and the answer was no. The club basically said because there's already a Jimmy Murphy centre at Carrington, they didn't want to do anything else. But I know there's still a strong feeling about this, whether it's a statue or a stand. Brian Mulholland is winning support for his campaign to rename K-Stand the Jimmy Murphy Stand. So I promised to give his campaign some support and see what the reaction is. Do we want a statue or a Jimmy Murphy stand?
Yeah, I think with the centre at Carrington, Brian mentioned it last week. No one sees it. You know, you get the odd press or the press people there, and obviously the players, but it's where you want the public to see it. Now, my granddad, he was full of quotes and sayings, and I just want to read one out, and at the end it's quite poignant as to the message we're trying to get across with granddad, with the remembrance of granddad after the horrors that he went through with Munich. If you don't mind, I'll just read out this quote of his, and at the end it's quite poignant. So basically this is what he said: "I knew these lads, I found them, I nurtured them, I was with them morning, noon and night, mud and rain, gales and snow, sun and wind. They let me mould them from the ground up. They repaid me, and they repaid this club with their skills, with their passion, and now with their lives. It's not just about honouring their memory, it's about showing who we are to the world, showing we will not be bowed by tragedy. How we are in the future will be founded on how we behave today." Jimmy Murphy, February 9, 1958. Now that final sentence, "how we are in the future will be founded on how we behave today." After Molly goes and all the MMFF, hopefully that keeps going, but if these guys forgot Jimmy Murphy's name, he'll be forgotten. And what he went through and how he rebuilt the club, it deserves a place next to Busby on the forecourt of Old Trafford. You've got the Trinity, you've got Busby. Jimmy Murphy needs to be there as well, I think. And it's just a poignant thing, that last sentence: how we are in the future will be founded on how we behave today. I guarantee you, 70% of the Old Trafford fans, if you asked who was Jimmy Murphy, they'd probably say, "I don't know." His name's not around Old Trafford, his statue's not around Old Trafford unless you go to the museum. And his name needs to be recognised more, maybe, I think. So generations of today pass on to their generations of tomorrow who Jimmy Murphy was and why this club is why it is today.
Paul, you've just summed up very poignantly exactly why I'm making my next big film, The Religion We Will Never Die, because it's all about keeping alive the legacy of our football club, a job done so magnificently by the MMMF and the Association of Former Players, because, as you say, once the older guys pass on, once we're not here anymore, we'll be relying on the younger ones to be informed. So it's important we do what we can now to make sure Jimmy Murphy is remembered as part of that story, because he's such an important part of our club.
It's a story to be told. It's not a story. But it's a story to be told and passed down to generations. Why? Obviously, like you just mentioned, people are aware of the Munich crash, but do they know the in-depths of the Munich crash and what happened afterwards? And it's just sad that if that just gets lost in history and time, and we need to keep that. We need to keep it going. We do because it's what Grandad went through, what he sacrificed in his personal life. My dad said he was never at home. He was trying to rebuild this club again, and he put a lot of sacrifice on the line. No, he didn't want anything for it, Grandad. He wasn't one to knock on the chairman's door and say, right, I want a pay rise, I want this, I'm doing this. He was doing it for the club. He could have gone anywhere in the world coaching, and he stayed faithful to Manchester United. I just want to read one more quote, John, just before we sort of end it. And it's from a book. Now, I'm not sure which book it was from, but great players play the game in their own time. Most great coaches, they have to think about the game to make up for what they lack in genius. His energy in making a player perfect is extraordinary. Night after night, day after day, week after week, year after year, this energy was barely acknowledged in public, but was taken for granted and then forgotten. And that was someone writing about my granddad. We spoke earlier about certain players, not only for United, but the Welsh team, Cliff Jones, Mel Charles, John Charles. Every one of these players, Cliff Jones, famous with Spurs, he said the best coach I worked with was Jimmy Murphy for Wales. And we can't forget him, and I thank so much to the MMMF and Pat Burns and Molly and everyone who supports it. It's just phenomenal, and we'll keep it going. And maybe one day the powers that be will have something for us.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned one thing there, Paul, that needs underlining, because the reason Jimmy wasn't in the Munich air crash was because he was on duty as manager of Wales and getting them to the World Cup. Your granddad was a fantastic manager in his own right, and as you say, he could have gone anywhere as a manager and didn't need to stay on as number 2 to Busby. He managed to balance being Wales manager with being Busby's right-hand man at United, and that in itself was remarkable.
Yep, and then people forget he lost Bert Wally, who was his best friend. Obviously Matt was touch and go, and he had no one around him in football circles to actually pull him through this. It was him on his own, and obviously the youth team were there. He got, he was coaching as well, but he had no one just to comfort and give him a cuddle every now and again. So he must have gone through hell. It's just so sad.
It is an incredible story. We'll go into it in more detail in the future and with the documentary. But for now, thank you so much, Paul, for joining me on the show tonight. I very much appreciate that, my friend.
John, keep up the good work, and thank you so much for having me on and listening to my stories about Grandad, and best wishes for the show and for the future.